And welcome everyone to an NABC chat with NABC Executive Director Craig Robinson. And Craig, let's do a little bit of an update here as we're in mid-December of how things are working out over the last couple of weeks. Right off the bat, masking. There are different ways to mask. You've got, Josh Pastner has the full face shield. Others have the gator, some different masks. Chris Mooney with the clear mask, and everyone's trying different things. But most importantly, you have to keep it on. And one of my pet peeves is certainly some coaches that will have it on when the camera's on them, but then when they're talking to their team or the official, suddenly they feel the urge to pull it down, which is actually when you're supposed to have it up because that's when the spit is coming out when you're actually talking. What's been your feedback and your observations of how coaches can do a better job of masking?
Well, Andy, first of all, thanks. It's always great to be with you. Happy holidays. Hope you and your family are well and healthy. But I've got to be very candid with you here. I am in your court on this one. Far too many of our coaches are being inconsistent. I'll use that word, with wearing their masks during the games, right? And then some aren't wearing them at all. And we've talked about this from the very beginning of my tenure here at the NABC, but I've heard it talked about since COVID has sort of reared its ugly head. Our primary concern is with the health and safety of our teams, and it should be that. And wearing a mask is a simple and effective method to reduce the spread of COVID-19. Brian Hainline has talked about that. Anthony Fauci has talked about that. It's been on the news every single day. So we shouldn't need the NCAA or conferences or anybody threatening our coaches with fines to get them to wear a mask. Our members are role models, and they should feel obligated to help society by wearing their mask, help their teams, help this game. So moving forward, I'm hoping that this message gets across to our membership, and we will keep pounding the drum on this as we move forward. But I appreciate you allowing me to bring that up.
What has been the feedback, though, that you've received if you have sent those reminders to various coaches saying, look, everyone can see you on television. It needs to be up at the right times. I mean, no one, if you want to take a drink of water and things like that during the course of the game, that's fine. But actually, when you are speaking, when you are talking to these officials and players, that's actually when it should be on the most.
Yeah, and I'll give these guys a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. We just had a Congress meeting where I mentioned it and we talked about it a little bit. And, for the most part, I think guys just forget, and they want to be heard when they want to be heard. So they bring it down to say something, and then they forget to pull it back up. And I've suggested that maybe they have somebody on their medical staff, the trainer, somebody in their tier 1 staff who is a medical person, be the one to remind them sort of in the moment, right? And so we'll see how that was received and how we manage this going forward.
All right, officials. I was down in the Mohegan Sun, and on day 1, 2 games, first group of officials did it exactly they're supposed to. When they would congregate, they pull it up, go talk to the coaches, they pull it up. Second game didn't happen at all. We talked to the organizers talked to the officials. Next game, the next day, they did it. How is it working right now from what you've seen? Because I've seen the same thing. I've seen a couple officials actually officiating with it up the whole time. And then others obviously do what you're supposed to, which is when you're running up and down, it's okay not to have it up. But then when you do talk to a coach or the stat crew or the official scorer or a player, that's when you should have it up.
Yeah, I would have to say my anecdotal data on the refs has been pretty good. We had our own MTE, the CBE Classic, and we had a couple of refs do just what you said. They wore their masks during the game, right? And even the guys who didn't wear them, when they spoke to the table or they spoke to the coaches, they put their masks on. And I'm not making excuses for anyone. There is a level of courtesy. You feel like not covering your mouth when you talk, so people can hear you. It is just we just have to relearn our behavior, right? And it's coaches, it's officials, and it's anybody in that sort of tier one group that has to speak to each other. We have to remind all of them to keep their masks up. And who's doing a great job of it are the players who are on the sidelines. And the players who aren't in the games have their mask up almost 100% of the time. So we have to get the message out more clearly.
All right. So in terms of the actual games, there are differing opinions on different schools. It's not just coaches. Obviously, some leagues, some conferences have made decisions about, essentially whether or not they should play, how many games they should play, non-conference, conference, and it is not one size fits all. And look, no one is making them play non-conference. There was a suggestion to play non-conference, and some leagues, like the Patriot, said, no, we're not playing non-conference. Army, Navy, of course, had an exemption, but the rest of the league can't play non-conference, and that's what it is. What's been your message to coaches who maybe have felt uncomfortable playing some of these games, who've decided not to, or have decided to, plow ahead and deal with all of the parameters that they have to?
Yeah, yeah. Well, the initial thing that comes to my mind is, having been a coach and both on the assistant level and the head coaching level, there's never a one size fits all, even in normal times, right? So there's certainly not going to be a one size fits all in a pandemic, right? So we've continued to encourage our coaches to understand that the disruptions were going to take place, be flexible, be creative, and that's indeed what's happened, right? You've got teams who are sort of making decisions on their own programs, obviously based on what they can do from an institutional standpoint and a state and local health standpoint. But we've encouraged our guys to be open to new ideas, and I thought playing these games, these non-conference games, was really important for all the teams, right? Not just the A5. So it was important for a lot of us to make sure we try to include some of the under-resourced teams in the non-conference. And while things haven't gone perfectly, and we've had canceled games, and that's been disappointing, there's also evidence that coaches are prioritizing health and safety over anything else, and we're playing about 75 to 80% of the games. So that's some empirical data right there showing that our coaches are really trying to get these games in.
All right, so let's deal with the mental health aspect. As you said, you had a tournament there in Kansas City when you were down there. From what I've talked to, all the players I've talked to, this is their sanctuary. A lot of college students, I have a college student in my house, they weren't able to do things on a college campus. These players are. They're actually able to get on a court, play basketball, practice or game without a mask. It's one of the only things on a college campus you can do right now without a mask, is actually play the game or practice the game. So that's important. What have you heard in terms of at least that aspect of giving them that opportunity to have something to do?
Yeah, Andy, you and I have talked about our player development coalition, where we interact with some of the players who are actually on boots on the ground. And before the season got started, the only message coming from them was, we want to play, right? And so we all tried to put together a situation where we could get our players on the court, and knowing that if we couldn't do it safely, there's no way we would be able to play. But once we got everything in place and got the season started again, we had our own tournament that I was a part of and went to see physically. It was actually the first place I had gone since March that wasn't sort of in my own bubble or pod situation. um, and I got a chance to talk to a few players there, and they couldn't have been more excited about playing. So if you're talking about a from a mental health standpoint, players playing is helps their mental aspect and the mental health aspect of their lives. Because let's not forget, anybody who is 18 to 22 who should be in college having a college experience is suffering some kind of mental health hardship at this point in time. And I'm just excited and happy that we can offer our student athletes an outlet.
If there is quarantine, and I'm talking about more for the players who are contact tracing, obviously, if they're positive, they have to deal with that. That's out of their control. What have you heard from coaches about trying to help those players deal with that kind of isolation, to have an outlet, maybe some controlled environment, safe outlet to get them out of those rooms, to help that aspect of the mental health, and also for muscular skeletal injuries when they come back, that they haven't been basically idle for anywhere from 7 to 14 days.
Yeah, again, Andy, it runs the gamut, right? There's not one, there are a lot of universities doing it a lot of different ways, and as a matter of fact, we've sort of started gathering information from all of our members to put together sort of a best practices that we can share with our membership, so they can take it back to their schools and their conferences, and some of the really thoughtful and creative things that I've heard are schools allowing players who are in isolation, as long as they are they're asymptomatic, allowing them an opportunity to get out of their room and go to a gym or go to a place where they can get some exercise, and not sort of confining them in a sort of prison like situation. Our coaches are doing some wonderful things from a creative standpoint, to make the time that they're not at practice be more collegial, doing more team bonding type events. And our schools have to be more flexible too. There are some of our coaches who have gotten their families and their homes sort of in the team bubble, so that they can have their players over to their house and have some sort of family like environment for the players to go to. And I think it is things like this that we're trying to pass along to the rest of the nation of coaches that we have, so that their players can have a better sort of a better environment as they're going through isolation and quarantine and other aspects of this pandemic.
So one last thing, Craig, and I've talked to a lot of coaches at various levels in person, because I was down in Mohegan Sun, and then of course, phone and Zoom and all that, is trying to stress to them that yes, it's not fair, it's not equitable, in large part because we've got 50 states. And I thought, without being political, one important thing that President-elect Biden said, which is that if he did a mask mandate, he can technically only mandate it for federal employees, because that's technically who he can control. He cannot control 50 states. And private businesses and all that. That's what obviously they control. And yet we've already seen this season, what may work in the state of Florida or Texas may not work in Massachusetts, because there's different health protocols, different way that everyone is doing it. Texas and Kansas both allowed fans at their games. Other schools, other conferences are not. How do you deal with coaches who say, oh, it's not fair, this school gets to do this and we can't, yet they are in probably two different states?
Andy, we first started talking about this, it was really tough to get guys to understand how decentralized it is. But I think now, because of the pandemic, guys understand that there is a whole different layer of reporting that happens, and they understand that a national mask mandate doesn't necessarily cover everything, and they're really understanding, very much like sort of the NCAA, how conferences control certain things, states control certain things, right? So I think our coaches understand that and are beginning to understand that more, and will understand it more as we move forward. But the one thing that I'd like to bring up on our coaches' behalf, it feels like this year everybody's getting a mulligan, right? Like the players are getting a mulligan. My kids who are working outside of sports, this is a year where their employers are telling them, look, this is a tough time. Let's get through the year, and then we'll figure out how to evaluate performance and things of that nature. This doesn't feel like a year that coaches are getting a mulligan, right? Because nobody's giving them a mulligan, and we're not begging for one. But when you're trying to win games in a pandemic, your judgment could get sideways. So I would just want everyone to remember, everybody's getting a mulligan but the coaches, and I'm trying to keep our coaches focused on doing what's right for student athletes, what's right for their programs, what's right for the game.
Appreciate it, Craig. Stay safe.
Thanks, Andy.